Hello and welcome to episode 8 of Late Night Linux, recorded on the 5th of April 2017. I'm Joe, and with me are Ikey.
Hiya.
And Jesse.
Morning all.
Don't start with that again. So we've got no Phelim because he's busy dealing with his mother-in-law, apparently.
We wish him all the best.
Indeed we do. Now, why are we back so soon? I think it's pretty obvious. This is a special episode with one news story to talk about, probably in depth, and that is Ubuntu. Today on the insights.ubuntu blog, which is no longer loading because of the magnitude of this, Mark Shuttleworth announced the end of Unity 8, and basically the fact that they are abandoning Unity, they're abandoning Ubuntu Phone, they are moving to GNOME for Ubuntu 18.04, and they're going to focus their efforts on the cloud and IoT and all those kind of buzzwords. This is a proper bombshell. And Ikey, you're going to take full advantage of this, aren't you?
I plead the fifth.
I mean, it's going to happen just out of the fact that all the people who are currently using Unity are going to have to look for another desktop environment. And obviously, there's official flavors of, fill me in when I get it wrong, GNOME, Solus, pardon me, Budgie, KDE, or is that just Neon?
No, there's still Kubuntu.
Okay, I assume there's XFCE.
Yes, that's what I'm using, Ubuntu.
Lubuntu.
Yeah.
And
that's it.
I've run out. Okay.
Ubuntu Mate, of course.
So people are gonna have to move to one of those, and so they're all going to see an upsurge in users, surely.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, the biggest question, the first question, is what happens to Ubuntu GNOME? Because if Ubuntu proper is moving to it, then surely that project is totally redundant.
Yeah, I see your point there. Maybe they just take the contributors and they become more privileged, more blessed because they're part of the main desktop environment that they're focusing on.
So the two projects would converge almost.
They'll finally get convergence. Yay.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing that you didn't mention in that intro, was the fact that because Unity is no more and the phone is no more, the whole concept of convergence has gone. And it's slightly ironic that on the last show we were talking about the move by Samsung and some other big names in the industry. Microsoft, for example, have got their own little convergence jobby, and we were sort of talking about how would it be big enough that it became a real thing. But in this announcement, Mark Shuttleworth saying that in the community the efforts are seen as fragmentation, not innovation, and the industry, which is the other area that he's trying to get people interested in it, hasn't rallied behind the idea, and they've just stuck with the known platforms like Microsoft and Windows and things like this. And so, given that neither of those groups were behind Canonical in their choice to go for convergence, they've had to accept that no one's backing them, so it's clearly not the right horse.
Is it just a case of because Samsung announced this, they realised there's no way we can compete?
It's not so sure, really, because, I mean, Samsung had Tizen, and they were still competing in the mobile space, so I wouldn't say they were related. I mean, obviously you can't ignore the timing. But they don't feel related. I mean, a lot of the companies, they're chasing where the market is at, and we know it's not in desktop Linux. Whatever way you want to dress it up, it's not in desktop Linux. And they've gone for the most obvious candidates, which is cloud and IoT, because at the moment, that's where the money is. And a company still needs to make money. So, do you have a financial black hole, or do you ensure that your company profits and that the user base you have are served?
Remind me what your distro is all about, Ikey? I actually said on the last episode it's about home computing, isn't it? Not necessarily the desktop.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I'm not looking to make any money out of it. But, I mean, if you was to say that I had any form of a business model, I don't. Basically. So, the ramifications for me would be different than an actual company where it's their bread and butter.
Yeah, your business model is looking to uphold yourself and a couple of contributors rather than an entire company's worth of people who are doing all sorts of different things. And Ubuntu obviously have to have R&D departments and things to try and work out, is this the area we want to go to? And if it becomes a big enough or interesting enough thing, they go with it, like they did with the phone. And they've had to then pump hundreds, thousands of hours into all of the code and all of the effort, all the time they spent talking to third parties to make the phones and hardware vendors and things like this. I'm not saying it's wasted, but it doesn't feel like it's got them very far. I fear, given that these major items on the canonical landscape have now been closed behind the door, and they also said goodbye to Ubuntu 1, 6 months ago? Wait, longer than that ago.
Yeah, a lot longer. Yeah, they're sort of pulling a bit of a Google, aren't they?
That's exactly where I was going. Yeah, it just feels there's more and more things that they're unable to follow through to the end, and it feels quite googly.
You do have to feel for. I mean, there's no way that they're going to continue to employ all the people they're employing. Surely, I mean, there are Unity developers who don't have a job anymore.
I mean, you got to feel sorry for them, really, because there are some great guys out there who have been working on Unity. And, I mean, we're in open source. It doesn't matter, really, if you don't use Unity yourself. You know, there's thousands upon thousands of people who are using it, who are supporting it, and fantastic contributors that were then employed by Canonical to work on this stuff. So, yeah, you certainly do feel for those guys.
And all the people that paid money for hardware. There's people that have not only paid money and have one or two phones that they were hoping would become their future devices, but also those that have put time into the software and the apps and the ecosystem and making their apps converge between the desktop and the phone and the tab and everything. There's a lot of time, not just by people who are being paid and have therefore, been paying the mortgage and everything, but those who have done it on their own backs. And it's got to be a bit of a slap in the face for those guys as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like, with things like that, you got to look at them really like you would at Indiegogo. You're backing a potential platform, not something that is established. And I don't think it's really going to come as a surprise to them on the phone side. But yeah, it's money for them thrown down the drain, because I'm assuming now that the code base wouldn't be maintained after that there wouldn't be any more OTA updates. Perhaps a final one, I don't know. Nothing's been said on that. But they've said that they're not invested in Unity 8, the phones or any of that anymore. So that's a whole slew of technology that's just going to stop overnight, including the Mirror Display Server, or Mir, or however you're supposed to pronounce it.
Mir.
Mir.
Yeah, do we know whether they're going to... I mean, they must be going to Wayland, surely.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to, because the whole idea of Mir, say it right this time, was that they had this same display server and had it on the phone and they had it on the desktop. Obviously, it's got a lot more bells and whistles, and I'm giving a gross oversimplification of it. But now that they're not doing Unity 8 and they're not doing phones, there is no reason now for that to exist. So, it's going to be GNOME, Shell, and Wayland now.
From a technical point of view, is it going to be that easy to strip out Mir and swap over to Wayland? Is it all just on the sort of the front end when it comes to the desktop environment and everything? Or is it more embedded, is it embedded more deeply than that?
Not really, because if you play with any of the other images, you can actually use Mir already. And you've already got X installed, so you can switch between Unity 7 and Unity 8. You can already do this with the development stuff. So from a packaging perspective, it's basically, just dropping the dependencies. Again, gross oversimplifications, but it's not really going to cause any problems there. But going forward, the toolkits will likely drop the support because GTK, etc., have that built-in Mir support. But then again, that's just package updates. It wouldn't be used anyway, so it would just vanish into the twilight, as it were.
But wasn't Unity moving towards Qt? And now, if they're going to go with GNOME, then obviously they're going back to GTK. So that's like loads more wasted effort there.
Yep, and I mean, the only one who's really doing well out of all of this is GNOME. Because for a long time, GNOME was very much on the map because every release of Ubuntu that came out was GNOME. And if the so-called glory years, like Ubuntu 10.10 and 10.04, some people to this day consider those the best ever Ubuntu releases. Obviously, it's down to each person's opinion, but you find a lot of people that used to love those releases went over to Mate because they can reclaim some of that charm again. And at the time, you know, it was very, very popular, and I would say it was quite damaging for GNOME when that relationship ended, because, you know, it's like we have our own stuff now. We're using Qt, you know, we're going with this display server, blah, 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 basically no GNOME. So they've actually sent out a tweet as well saying, welcoming them back to the fold.
I mean, that was a surprise to me that instead of GNOME, why didn't they go with Mate? I mean, they've got Martin working for him now, Wimpress, the developer of Ubuntu Mate. Why didn't they just make that desktop official and swallow Ubuntu Mate into the Ubuntu project?
I don't think it's flashy enough, is it? I mean, if you're downloading the flagship version of Linux, then it needs to be, dare I say it, elegant and slick. I'm not saying that Mate isn't, but I think GNOME is more what the modern consumer is expecting to see.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because the three of us are not going to be affected by this, at least directly at all, are we? I'm sitting here with XFCE. Jesse, you're on GNOME, I believe, and Ikey, you fucking made your own.
Just to be awkward.
So, you know, we're not actually going to be hugely affected by this, are we?
Well, we will, because you're going to see like a bigger focus now on GNOME, because that's where all the eyes will be looking. And in terms of why didn't they go for Mate, I honestly think, and again, I can't speak for them, but I think it's because GNOME is basically ready already. You know, it has the Wayland support already, so that could already link in with the isolation stuff if they were still pursuing that. You know, there's been no messaging about that side of things. I mean, I'm assuming Snap is still going to be an important thing because of IoT and cloud. You know, it has relevance there, unlike Flatpak, which is desktop orientated only. Snap, it's, you know, it works out in the cloud, it works in the servers. So Wayland would already hand in nicely with all that isolation stuff, because again, X11 is inherently insecure. And things like high DPI already working. It's something that still needs adding to Mate. So if you was to look at the two of them and say, which one requires more investment to get it to where we need it, it's going to be GNOME. And that's not me insulting Mate. It's just one of them is technologically further than the other.
Yeah, and where they need it is dropping on a new user or someone who is used to Linux's desktop and being able to do all the things they want to do with it. I mean, the point about high DPI support is perfect. If you have gone from Unity, which has 50% support, and GNOME has 50% support, to go to one that has zero support is going to be a huge step back.
It would literally be considered a regression.
And they started out with GNOME. No one's shocked about GNOME. If it was KDE, there'd be some head scratching and, you know, that's interesting sort of thing. But with GNOME, it's like, well, yeah, everyone could kind of have guessed that, really.
In a way, it's kind of like going back to the roots.
Yeah, even if the roots have moved on.
But it's funny you point out about IoT there, and just quoting from Mark's post there, he says, you might also know that most of the IoT work in autos, robotics, networking and machine learning is also in Ubuntu, with Canonical providing commercial services on many of these initiatives. And so in that, he's pointing out, you know, the places where they're making their money is dealing with these big companies who are moving to IoT. I mean, if you're in autos, you know, the sort of self-driving cars and also the in-car entertainment, that's obviously a huge push. How many cars are sold, robotics, networking, IoT and that sort of area. If they are in there at the start and they're one of the big players, then that's clearly going to be an area of massive growth. Whether it affects us or not, which I doubt it will really, as desktop users, is neither here nor there. The company has got to be profitable, and that's where the future is, isn't it?
Well, the thing is, they tried the desktop and failed. They tried mobile and failed. And now they're trying IoT, and we'll have to see how they get on with it. I mean, they've done very well with servers, it seems. So, you know, 1 out of 4 so far. But, you know, could it be that they'll throw loads at the IoT stuff and fail at that as well?
I wouldn't say they failed at the desktop, actually. I would say they're evolving. I mean, obviously this one here is a direct knock-on effect of where can we make money. And obviously hiring lots of developers to work on this stuff, for them, it's clearly not profitable. Otherwise, this wouldn't be happening, right? But in terms of failing, I wouldn't say so, because the way that Linux desktop now, we kind of owe that to Ubuntu. Regardless of what the desktop looks for people nowadays, if it hadn't been for Ubuntu coming along and investing all of those resources in the beginning and doing some stuff which failed, some stuff that succeeded, in general, it's kind of like, winning the battle versus winning the war. And they've had tremendous success on the desktop. And a lot of people owe the fact that they're able to create something which is appealing as a desktop system because it's Linux to Ubuntu. Because they're the guys that went around and advertised this stuff. They're the ones who eased it into the public to make it acceptable and desirable and more usable and focused on the bits that mattered to the casual user. So even though they're ending this particular part of their project, I would say they've had the most success with the Linux desktop out of anyone before them.
Well, that's definitely true, but success has not translated into profit.
Okay, that's the
and so if you are going to be brutally honest about it, therefore it's not a success. If it's not profitable, it's not a success.
Yeah. So from a fiscal perspective,
yeah, exactly.
It's no.
So one of the big questions I've got is, we are very nearly at the 1704 release, right? Which means that if they're going to get GNOME into the next LTS, which is what Shuttleworth said in this announcement, that means they've got exactly 1 year to do that. Now, you have talked about, Ikey, how it's almost just drop-in replacement for Unity at this stage. But is that really true? I mean, surely there's going to be things for them to iron out, and especially if they're going to move to Wayland, something that they've never used before at all. They've never spent any, at least publicly, resources and time on Wayland. And so how are they suddenly going to be able to do that in a year?
Well, I think the main problem that they have is they know that GNOME works, right? But they also have to make sure, as now their primary edition, it meets their requirements. And the Unity itself isn't the hardest part to remove. It's all of the forked components around it. So you have things like the Unity settings daemon, which is a fork of GNOME settings daemon. You have the Unity control center, again, from GNOME control center. And then they've got to ask, do we want to keep these as patches to these things? Do we want to retain these forks? Because there might be some Unity-specific functionality that no longer exists in GNOME. In terms of a fresh install of a system, that's the easiest thing to achieve for them in terms of bringing, a great out-of-the-box experience for GNOME Shell. The problem they're going to have is the upgrade path to make sure that going over time, all of the wrong bits are removed, all of the right bits are added, and things still work, because it's almost a migration at this point. So I wonder if for the existing editions, they'll keep Unity in the repos and just keep people on them. And then the default package selection instead would be changed. So instead of deprecating it from the repos, just putting it into maintenance mode. So from that
which it has been for years anyway.
Well, I mean, from that perspective, it's a lot easier to achieve. So by the time they get to the LTS, to say, this is now the default selection, it's now using GNOME Shell. Technically, that would be far easier to achieve. And to be honest, less disruptive, because there are going to be people, even after they've said that Unity is gone, dead, whatever, people are going to get very, very annoyed if all of a sudden it switches over. And I don't think Mark is going to do that. Because when they first introduced Unity, he has later come to say that they shouldn't have done that. That they shouldn't have forced switch to Unity in the first place, because they got a lot of heat from it. And he's even said in his own blog before, that he understands now and he wouldn't make the same mistake again. So going on that and the past experiences they had from already switching people over to Unity in the first place, I don't think they're going to do anything like a migration path, to be quite honest. I think it's going to be an opt-in and a default for the LTS install. So from the technical perspective, they haven't got to do a migration path anymore. If they go that route, which I think they will, there's no migration involved. There's no settings conversion. There's no deprecations to worry about. It's just the out-of-the-box experience at that point. So within a year, definitely achievable.
So the people who do a fresh install will get the choice of GNOME or Unity, and those who are doing a standard, dist upgrade will stick with Unity up until the point where their actual LTS or whatever runs out of support.
I mean, that would be the easiest way. So, like, it just stays in the repos and it just doesn't go into the new releases. I think that'd be the easiest one. I wouldn't say that once you get to the LTS, that the Unity one would be an option anymore. I mean, obviously, I can't speak for them. That's their own decision. But I wouldn't have thought it would have been an option at that point.
But hang on. So what if you are using 1604 now, if you're a sensible person who goes LTS to LTS and who has upgraded potentially from 1004 or even 1204, whatever, if you're using 1604 now, come a year's time when 1804 comes out and you are offered the upgrade, what's going to happen at that point? I mean, surely it's going to have to go to GNOME like it was, you went from GNOME 2 to Unity. Surely it's going to go Unity to GNOME now.
True.
And that's going to piss a lot of people off.
It's a painful one. I mean, at some stage, it's going to have to be removed from the repos, unless the existing community of contributors were to take over that project. But I don't know if that would be something that would even be an option at this point. But I mean, it doesn't need forking, right? It's already up there. If other people from the community wanted to contribute to it, I couldn't really see them saying no, because it's already happening.
What's the it in this case? You talk about Unity.
The it, like Unity itself. So it might even be that, people just keep contributing to it and it sort of ticks on by. There might not be any need to remove it.
Well, there might well be a Unity version of Ubuntu that's a community flavor.
That could work, yeah. And then the default option just becomes GNOME shell. That's probably the easiest way. If there's no deprecations, no removals, because I imagine people are going to keep contributing to it anyway. And yeah, change the default, no upgrade path needed. That would be the path of least resistance and least pain.
Well, can we talk about community for a second, right? Now, at the moment, the Unity version is supported by Canonical. There's people who they are paying to work on it, right? And then you've got the community flavors, like Ubuntu Mate, which is done all in Wimpress's spare time. So he's not paid to work on that at all. And similarly, same situation with all the other flavors, right? But surely this is a move towards a future where they're not having to pay anyone to work on the desktop version at all, and they can just concentrate all of their money and effort on the cloud and IoT stuff, the profitable stuff. And it's just going to get abandoned to the community, is what I'm speculating here. And it's what we speculated back on Luddites years ago.
No, I mean, they have OEM installs of the desktop version of Ubuntu. So they still need a good out-of-the-box experience. I mean, this is a case of downscaling, not dropping. So obviously it's going to be a far smaller team, but the desktop systems are still important to them because at the end of the day, they are getting sales through Dell and the likes of those guys. People are selling OEM Ubuntu, and that is the desktop. So somebody at Canonical is still going to be working on it. Somebody is still going to be doing the patches, the updates. It's not going to be a huge team like it is now, but it's not going to be completely dropped out to the community because they still have to, it's still, the default experience itself is still part of their brand, and you don't want to crowdsource that.
Yeah, exactly. So if you think about how Ubuntu looks, that is the choice of a group of contributors in the community who make Ubuntu look a lot better than stock XFCE, certainly, but it maybe isn't the view that Canonical would have taken had they had that as their desktop default. And same with Ubuntu and things. There are ways you'd want to change it. The whole 6-month cycle where they bring out a new mascot, a new name and everything, that all has to be branded and put in. And the people who get the new wallpapers and the colors and everything are the people who are using the blessed desktop environment in which normally that's Unity, and then it switched over to GNOME. They're going to not want to take the GNOME, the community edition, because that's out of their control. They're going to want to have maybe some of those contributors doing some of the background stuff, but certainly the thing that the user sees has to be branded by Canonical, by Ubuntu, to be the way they want that to be conveyed to the new user or to the long, the LTS user and everything, people who are used to that. And they they need to have. I think there's going to be a lot of people who need to tweak GNOME so that it's not stock. It's got an Ubuntu twang to it.
But hang on, you say you're using a lot of words like they have to do this, they have to do that. They don't have to do anything. They could abandon it to the community. And
but they're not going to, though, are they?
Well, they could do. I mean, look at the Dell stuff, right? How much money are they really making from those Dell desktops? Yeah, desktops, laptops, the Ubuntu desktop.
I would say probably enough that it's important.
But is it you've got to think about these things in terms of a business, because that appears to be finally what Shuttleworth is doing here. He's decided that he cannot keep pouring money into the black hole that is Ubuntu. And so it's simple maths. If they're getting in X number of dollars from Dell, but they're spending out X plus something on the development of the desktop, then it does not make financial sense, and they should abandon it to the community at that point and just cut their losses.
What's your link with Dell here? I mean, Dell put on an OEM version of Ubuntu.
Yeah, and they get a kickback for it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not requiring Ubuntu to do anything more than produce the standard OEM. They're not making like Dell's specific version.
No, but it's requiring them to make a desktop. It's requiring Canonical to pay people to make the desktop when there are people out there who will put GNOME on top of it for free for them. Look at Ubuntu GNOME now. Yes, they have to make all the underlying stuff, which they would do anyway for their cloud and IoT. But the desktop, they could just let the community take care of that for them.
Nah, branding. One word, branding.
The experience itself is a brand asset. And I mean, as much as they are invested, obviously, in things like IoT and cloud, these are the two core areas for them now. The developers who are working on those systems, the thousands of, say, even the OpenStack contributors, right? What are they running on their laptops to develop this stuff? They're running Ubuntu. So you're not going to have some crowdsourced, everybody happy hippie desktop experience. You're going to have something that is tightly controlled and to your specification. Because again, it literally is a brand asset. This is the face of Ubuntu.
Yeah, exactly. You need it to be slick and have the look that you want, even if it's just down to simple things like the color schemes and the way in which things pop up and pop down. If someone puts on spinning cubes as the default in GNOME Community Edition, Ubuntu are going to be spinning about the very fact that that's such a stupid thing to have. They need to have, and I'm saying they have to, and all these sorts of things, but I do feel it's important for them as a company with a brand to have full control and all the fingers and all the pies in order to have it, as Ikey was saying, have it seen the way they want it to be seen as a company brand.
Well, maybe. Well, that remains to be seen, but I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that they care enough about that branding issue, to be honest. But it's pure speculation at this point. But can we speculate about a wider issue here, and that is the death of the Linux desktop, which is inevitably what people are going to be talking about, and the death of the desktop generally. I mean, we've spoken so much about this. We've now got to the point where Android has overtaken Windows as the most popular OS, at least by one count. And, anecdotally, I see it everywhere. And, I talked about this on Linux Unplugged last night. I mean, the fact remains that most normal people don't really use laptops or desktops anymore, apart from in the office or in the studio, whether you're, art or video or whatever. There are professionals using it, but in terms of consumers, laptops are not really a consumer device anymore. And so is it any wonder that they have stopped caring so much about it? I don't know. It just seems to me that, okay, it's not the death of the Linux desktop, but it's certainly a sign of the times.
I don't know what to say to that.
Well, as someone who develops a desktop distro.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not blind to it. Obviously, the desktop is nowhere near as important as it used to be. There was a time where you needed a desktop system. This was this was your ticket into the information superhighway, as they were so keen on calling it, right? You know yourself, that was the way they were spoken about. Nowadays, I mean, you can get on the internet anywhere. You know, you can even do it through your television. That's the way it's gone now. I mean, I've got a web browser built into my PlayStation. Don't get me wrong, it's the most insecure browser in the world, but I've got one. I think the desktop's still going to remain important for a while. I think we got another few years out of it. But yeah, it's declining. But nobody's found the true solution to it yet, which is kind of what I was going on about on the last episode. You know, we're experimenting at the moment with convergent devices and focusing on the hardware and input methods, when at the end of the day, it all comes down to information and experience, not the form factor. So over the next few years, I'd like to think that in general and the wider picture-wise, we all start to realize that and focus on those bits that actually do matter. And then, yeah, I mean, you want to get to a point where a desktop isn't really a desktop anymore. Solus users are going to murder me for that. But, you know, where everything is just a thin client. I think that's the point we're going to get to eventually. So at that point, it's only the form factor that matters and not the capabilities, because it's just another way of interpreting and representing data and information. And that's where I'd like to see us get to, as opposed to, this is a desktop, it does desktop-like things. This is a phone, it does phone-like things. And I think that's kind of the problem at the moment. We're trying to look at the same thing in 15 different ways, depending on what we're doing it on, as opposed to, this is information, give me access to it. So we'll get there in the end. But we've got another few years left of the desktop, yeah. Even if it's just me, you know, hanging out in IRC, the year 2029, the only guy left on a desktop.
Well, I mean, to answer the question, I would look at where Canonical are now investing, because they're, like you say, they're stepping back from the desktop. So they've on their blog post, they've said they investing in Ubuntu itself. Okay, fair enough. Servers and VMs, for example, they're obviously going to be incredibly important as everything moves to cloud. Ubuntu investing in cloud infrastructure products, OpenStack and Kubernetes, cloud operations, MAS, LXD, Juju, Bootstack, and IoT, Snaps, and Ubuntu Core. And I think if you look at what those are all ways of interacting with PCs, but in ways that you're not doing it sat at a keyboard and a mouse. So IoT, when it comes to things that are either, you know, as small as the I would say thermistor, the thing that does the temperature in your house.
Thermostat,
that's the one. And too much engineering. And so, you know, those sorts of things that are IoT devices, they need a computer, or they don't need a computer, but the world is moving towards having them as computers, and they want to be there. And if you can think about the number of things in your house that could have an IoT device in it, or people are pushing for that, it's significantly more than you'll ever have PCs in your house. And if they are in that area, and they're in the area that they can be in cars, and they can be in the very foundations of what runs all of the cloud, then the what people view as Windows dominance when it was at its absolute peak, like XP years, where they had like 90% market share and there were these hundreds of thousands of desktops or laptops, the future of having IoT devices and servers alone is going to dwarf that number of desktops and installs. And so I see it. I can see why they're going this way, because it's the way to get the most number of installs, and that has to be a way of, you know, defining how much you're going to make on the bottom line.
So, have we got any positive things to say about this then?
Yeah,
I'm sure we can think of one. So, I mean, it is the end of the Unity era, but then even though towards the end of that era, people were saying, actually, it's not so bad, I think it's generally going to be seen as a time that Ubuntu made a mistake and people didn't like it. I know there are loads of people who like Unity and got on well with it, but generally it's been a time in which Canonical have consistently done something that was forking or different from the community or taking their own path. Look at Unity, look at Mir, look at the phone, and now they will step back into line. I don't mean that in a sort of army way. I mean it into the fold, and their contributions will contribute towards all of the things that we use outside of Unity, outside of Ubuntu. So, their contributions to GNOME, their contributions to
Wayland,
GTK3, things like this will be seen in the upstream and will be appreciated. So I think that's a real positive to take away.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited about where this is going because to me, it kind of feels how it used to be back a few years ago when they used to run GNOME, like back around 2010. When that was their main bread and butter for the desktop at the time. And I say everyone's going to benefit from this. Even if you don't use Ubuntu, the fact that it's now going to be their primary platform, GNOME users everywhere, and not just users of GNOME, anything that uses components of it. So even me, funny enough. So I don't use Ubuntu. I don't use GNOME stock. I have Budgie. But the current version of Budgie would benefit from Ubuntu making their primary platform GNOME because it uses GNOME bits, and they're going to make sure they work well on Ubuntu and have contributions going back upstream again. I mean, that whole relationship's going to be starting up again, and it'd be nice to see where it goes. I'm optimistic, and as you say, they've recognized the mistake. It's time to turn a new leaf, and I think in general, it's going to be good. It's not going to be something that's Ubuntu specific anymore. It's going to be part of a wider Linux experience.
Well, yeah, you're definitely right. It's going to mean more work on GNOME and more standardization, I think, which is good. I mean, they're pushing snaps as the standardized packaging format. And if we standardize on Wayland as a display server, then that's got to be good news, hasn't it?
It'd be good from a driver perspective as well, because there's always been that worry, like, say, with the NVIDIA drivers, and will they support Wayland, and do they have to support Mir? Well, for the companies now, they only have to support one thing.
Yeah.
And they can put all the focus into that one technology. There's no more competition.
Yeah, that's true. Right, well, I suppose we've been banging on about this for long enough. We'll probably cover it a bit in the next proper episode. And yeah, we'll be back on schedule. When is that one going to be? Oh, I don't know, 18th of April, that's going to be, I think. So yeah, until then, I've been Joe.
Gold, frankincense, and...
Mirror.
Mir.
I've been Jesse.
I'm still Ikey.
See you later.